So recently, Daisuke at Daisuke Beppu made a video talking about his favorite film and how there may be a different film that actually is his favorite film, as opposed to the one that he's been saying is his favorite for a number of years. And this is a sort of idea for a video that I had wanted to do anyway, but I also thought that I would sort of make this in response to the video that he made talking about his favorite film and just the way that he thinks of favorite films. So I thought I would talk about my experience, I guess, with my favorite film and like why it is my favorite film, even though it has like sort of a lack of an explanation. So if you don't know, my favorite movie is Purple Noon. I usually call it Plein, Soleil. That's the French title. It's a French film from 1960, directed by René Clément. And this is on the Criterion Collection as spine number 637. And the Criterion Collection is how I watched this in the first place. So it was Valentine's Day weekend 2013, and Criterion was like promoting this weekend as being able to watch their titles on Hulu Plus for free. Like if you didn't have Hulu Plus, you could watch the titles that they had available on there, which is what they did before they had Filmstruck. And obviously now Filmstruck is no longer a thing, and soon we're going to have the Criterion channel. At one point they had their like streaming catalog available on Hulu Plus. And even though I had Hulu Plus, so it wasn't like I was taking advantage of the deal itself, but I took it as a sign to watch Criterions for the first time, like knowing that they were on the Criterion Collection, like watching these films for the first time, knowing they were on the Criterion Collection. I had just discovered Criterion and like fully looked it up just a few months before that. And anything that I had seen that was on the Criterion Collection, obviously I had just like sort of seen as movies, but this time around, I don't know, it just like felt different that I was watching films that I knew were Criterion. So I didn't know anything about the film. I just went based off of the photo that they used, and I also think that it happened to be one of the titles talked about in the video that initially made me look up what the Criterion Collection was, so perhaps I recognized the title. But not knowing anything about the film and not having any specific expectations is a major factor as to why it became a favorite film. If I know too much about something beforehand, I contemplate it too much and I get really in my head, and then I start to like predict what I think is going to happen and the way that I would want things to go, whether it be in the storyline or the way that the film was made. And then whatever happens in the movie usually doesn't live up to like whatever I've done in my head. So that's why I don't like to know a lot about a movie beforehand. And that's how I go into Criterions most of the time. I like to blind buy them. Especially because there are films that, for the most part, I would still say that I'm like really not that familiar with a lot of them. Whenever Criterion has announcements, I'm just like, well, here are more films that I mostly haven't heard of. And although it like really doesn't have anything to do with expectations I had about the film, I will mention that the photo that they had, as you were like going through the titles they had available, the photo for Purple Noon is the photo of Alain Delon, the actor, the main actor, steering a boat. This is what I was doing, steering a boat, shirtless. The shirtless part isn't important, but he was like alone in this photo, and for some reason I looked at the photo and thought, okay, he's the only character, and it solely takes place on a boat, which is completely incorrect, and was eliminated from my mind as soon as I started the movie, because after the opening credits, the first scene is like a couple of characters at a cafe outside, like not on a boat. So even though it only lasted for like a minute, I thought I would mention that I had that anticipation for like, that minute. I'll also say that it's an adaptation of a book that I'm not going to tell you what the book is. I may have mentioned it before, but again, if I had known that it was this adaptation, it might have influenced the way that I thought it was going to go. So, yeah, for the most part, I didn't have expectations or, specific expectations. I knew it was on the Criterion Collection, so I assumed it was going to be a great film. That was about it. And specifically, there's a scene, which I'll set the scene right now. again, though being vague, so you don't know too much about it if you haven't already seen it, there is a scene where the character of Marge and Philippe, they're on the boat. The boat does have a lot to do with what happens. They're on the boat. They're below deck. I don't really know boat lingo, but I think that's safe to assume. They're below deck, and Marge is working on a book. She's writing a book, and she has notes and like drafts all over the table, and she's writing, and she has like other books open that she's using as resources. And her and Philippe, who they're engaged, they get into an argument, and in the heat of the moment, Philippe gathers a bunch of Marge's papers, goes up the steps, and throws her papers to the ocean. And they're in the sea now and no longer usable. And in that moment of like him opening his arms, like before he's even fully let go of the papers, you can just see this like instant regret on his face before he's even completed the action. And Marge makes it just in time, like going up the steps, to see her papers like flying in the air and landing in the water. And she's just like done. They've had sort of other problems before, and this whole argument is sort of a climax for their relationship, but like in a negative way. And this scene stands out to me because as I was watching the film for the first time, I suddenly realized that I was like standing up and I was directly in front of my television, and not only just like standing right in front of my TV, in front of the screen, but I had like my legs spread apart a bit so that my height, the height, like where my head is, was parallel to where the TV was, where the screen was, because if I was just standing up normally, my head would be higher than the screen, if you get what I'm saying. So suddenly, I'm watching this film and I realize that I'm like standing up and I'm not sitting on my bed anymore, I'm not laying on my bed anymore. I don't remember getting up. I don't know why I got up in the first place. Like, I have no idea. And even more so now, I like really don't remember why I got up or when I got up or anything like that. Perhaps like when this was actually happening, I had more of an idea. I couldn't figure out if I like was going to go downstairs to get more water or get a snack, or if I was going to go to the bathroom, and just like I was waiting for the scene to be over to like pause the movie. I don't know. But upon that realization, I was looking around, realizing I was in front of the screen like that, and I was so engaged and so engrossed in the film. And it wasn't even like, I don't know, like I still think there's really nothing like that significant about the scene. Yet as soon as I was like aware of what just happened, I was like, this is my new favorite film. Like, I said it out loud to myself. And but that's important because for me, when it comes to favorite things, I usually have like a moment where I say to myself out loud or in my head that this is my favorite or new favorite, whatever it is, book, movie, musician, which actually you witnessed. I think it was obviously if you watched the video, I think it was my December favorites video. I was talking about EXO, as I do, and they're my favorite K-pop group, but I think I said that they're probably my favorite music artist overall. And then I like realized I said that, and I was like, wow, that's probably true. That's correct. And I like had a moment in my video where I realized that EXO is my favorite musical artist like ever overall of all the music that I listen to. So that was a moment. And sometimes that happens obviously like while I'm experiencing that thing, or perhaps it happens later on, years after, months after, maybe upon re-experiencing it. So while I was watching Plein, Soleil, I had the moment of it being my new favorite film. And then when I actually bought the physical copy here, the supplement that is the new interview with René, Clément scholar and author Denitsa Bentcheva. I'm sorry if I mispronounced that. But watching that supplement in particular just like cemented it as being my favorite film, because there's one part in particular, I just said in particular like twice in a row. I really try not to do that. I notice I say that all the time. Okay. But the feature goes through things that René Clément did as director. And there's one thing specifically that just I thought I was so impressed by. I was just like, oh my God, this is amazing. I had never thought about film in that way, especially when it didn't seem it didn't seem completely necessary, I guess. So there's another scene, again to be vague, there's a scene where a character falls, and while the person falls, a bag of groceries spills out on the floor, and among the groceries is an uncooked chicken that like lands in the same position as the person who fell. They're in the same position. They're not like parallel, but they're in the same position. And for René Clément to like do that, I just thought was, I don't know, I was just, again, I was so impressed. And especially because it's a meticulous thing that isn't something I would be like, hey, I bet that was done on purpose. So like for comparison, think about Wes Anderson films, like his films are so stylized, and you can tell that he has put all this thought into the color palette and where everything is on set, and he even has so much input in like the music for the film and the costumes. Like everything is just like Wes Anderson, like you can just tell. And yeah, it's just highly stylized, and you can tell that he's put all this meticulous work into it. And I think for films that are a bit more realistic or look more natural, that don't look highly stylized, it doesn't seem as obvious to me, even though they could be just as meticulous as something that is stylized. And so that just sort of opened my eyes more to all the details that could be in a film that probably go unnoticed and are overlooked. And yeah, so that feature just cemented it as my favorite film. And I haven't changed my favorite film since. Obviously, it's been 6 years, and I've somewhat thought about, like, if it wasn't my favorite film, what would be my favorite film? Or, like, when I see something else that I really love, I question, like, oh, is this my favorite film? Could this be my favorite film? But nothing has really come close to it. And perhaps I've just become like really attached to it being my favorite film. It's really hard for me to like change favorite things unless I'm just completely blown away by it, or I have a really strong like personal connection to it somehow, which is actually what it's like for my favorite book, which I forgot to mention. I'm also going to be talking about that. It's a whole different scenario, a whole different situation as to why my favorite book is my favorite book, so I thought I would also talk about that, because with Plein, Soleil, it's very much in the moment and a little bit of a lack of explanation. It just happens to be my favorite film, whereas my favorite book is a lot more personal, basically. I will say that, like, at the time I didn't really know it, but now that I know my film taste a little bit more, it also aligns with certain interests I have and sort of genres and categories that I'm really into. Of a lot of my favorite films and films that I gravitate towards, I really love films from the 1960s. I love French films. I love art house films, and I also really like when there is some sort of psychological aspect, which there, even though it's not majorly a part of this film, it does have to do with what's happening. It's very subtly in the plot line. So I think that's it in terms of my experience with watching Plein Soleil for the first time and it becoming my favorite film. I guess I'll also just say that before this was my favorite film, Psycho was my favorite film. And with that, it had been my favorite for like 1 to 2 years. I'm not sure the exact amount of time. But this, Plein Soleil, is definitely the film that has stayed my favorite for the longest amount of time. And with Psycho, it became my favorite because I just didn't really know that much about it. And I'm so glad. If you have not seen Psycho for some reason and you're watching this video, watch Psycho as soon as you can. You know, if you don't know that much about it. Even if you do know like a little bit about it, it's best to watch Psycho like as early as possible, as long as you're like a good age to watch the film, obviously, because it's considered like a classic scary movie. I wouldn't call it horror, but I'd call it scary, I guess. But I like didn't really know anything about Psycho. I knew the name of the main character and like that this is the story that this character is from. And obviously with a title like Psycho, you know someone's, you know, going to be a little crazy probably. There's going to be a psychological aspect to the story. And I was just like blown away. Again, it was another film that I was really engrossed in, and I was amazed with Psycho. Amazed. And with Psycho, of course, it's like the end of the film that you really realize just how great it was, I think, because it's like, obviously you have the conclusion part to it. Okay, I feel like I'm kind of rambling a bit because I'm trying to make sure that I've mentioned everything pertaining to films being my favorite films, just overall as favorites or as my all-time favorite. I like having like an all-time favorite film as well. I know that some people may not be able to choose just one, but I like having just one. Also, I think I'm just like, I'm so used to saying that Plein Soleil is my favorite film, and I've sort of become attached to it. It's like, it's a personal thing now, and I feel like it's sort of part of my identity in a way, which may have to do with why I have a hard time changing favorite things of mine, which was, again, that's something that I'll be talking about with my favorite book. So I'm probably going to just film that like right now. So thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. And I'd love to know what your favorite film is and like why it's your favorite film, maybe how long it's been your favorite film for. And I also want to go back. I will link Daisuke's video in the description and in the card. I want to go back to his video and read people's comments that were left on that. Yeah, so thank you for watching. Look forward to my favorite book. Why my favorite book is my favorite book? I'm not sure what I'm going to title these videos yet. But here I am. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!